everyone, welcome again to another 360 Timmy Minisode. So last week I did an unscripted episode on mental health and I actually quite liked the format, so I thought this week I'd stick to that. I'm not going to talk necessarily more about mental health, but just to say a big thank you to everybody who watched last week's episodes, who fed back on YouTube, but also reached out on social media, text or called me. I did say I was okay and I was doing good. I was on the road to improvement, but I was so touched by all of you reaching out and saying, Tim, you can always go out for a drink. We can always talk. I'm always there for you. I am there for you as well, equally, I'll say to all of you, but very humbled, and it was an amazing response. Now, another message I got was from my friend Ash. Now, Ash, as I mentioned last week, introduced the concept to me of the mental health first aid kit. And he left me a little voicemail message saying he was glad that I'd found a coping mechanism. Now, again, something triggered in my head that I hadn't really heard that. I've heard of coping mechanism before, but not in the context of mental health, and perhaps I should have done, because he's right. I have actually found a coping mechanism. I found a way through it. And I did mention last week as well that I used video as a kind of therapy. And because it was unscripted last week, I forgot to talk about it at the end of the episode. So I thought on this episode, I'd cover why I do this podcast, where it all came from in the dim and distant past, and how I've been into video for quite some time and I've done all kinds of things. So really, it all started for me. You've seen in previous episodes, I grew up in Germany and my dad was in the army. In Germany, we had a very limited television service, so I kind of grew up with one channel with all kinds of American and UK content, and I was fascinated by this little television station that made it all work, BFBS.
This is BFBS television. We now join ITN for the lunchtime news. The time in Germany is 2 o'clock.
When I returned to the UK, in 1985, I had 4 channels to watch, incredible. And one of those channels was an ITV station. So in the UK, in the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, ITV was effectively run by a series of companies across the UK. And depending on what region you lived in, is what company you had serving you. When I returned to the UK, we had TVS, Television South, and the news was literally presented 20 miles up the road from where I live today in Maidstone. And I was absolutely fascinated that this television station was something I could see and touch.
It's been hard work and more hard work building a brand new £17 million studio centre from nothing and doing it in under a year. But TVS was determined to achieve it, and now that hard effort at Vinters Park near Maidstone means that the new TVS centre is open on the button, as we wished, and it's one of the best in the world. This new centre, plus the effort which we've put into all other areas, means that right now we have the right tools for the job. That job is to bring a better and better service on TVS for the South and South East.
Being in Germany, thousands of miles away from where it was all happening, I never saw anything like that. But now I could drive past and I could see those letters, TVS, on the Maidstone studios as we go around, family trips and etc. So I was absolutely fascinated by it, and I loved the local news. Very quirky if you look back at it now. In fact, let's look at a clip of how news was done back in the 1980s by Television South.
Now, the bad news tonight is that there's no Ron Lobeck. The good news? We'll have a real weather forecast for a change, shall we? As you can see, the situation today, high up there, low down there, and those are the two sides, so a fairly simple picture. Tonight it'll be dark everywhere, and the temperatures will drop, becoming much brighter, that brighter weather spreading in from the east around dawn. It's great fun over here. I've been raiding Ron Lobeck's drawers, and all the little boats and other toys that we don't often see are coming out. And what better way to celebrate our 400th edition of Coast to Coast. Shame Ron can't be with us tonight. Anyway, we'll be back with a real weatherman at the same time. That's 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. In the meantime, from all of us, bye-bye.
So really, this is what injected me. I wanted to work in television. The more I watched TVS, the more I watched Meridian, which took over from it. The more I wanted to do TV, and that was going to be my dream. So I came back to the UK originally saying I think I wanted to be a policeman. I ended up working in the police in a different aspect. I wanted to be a vet. I decided I didn't like animals. That wasn't so good. But television, absolutely fascinating. I wanted to be behind the scenes of everything that went out at Maidstone, and I chose all my career options around that. Now, because of that, whilst I was at school, we're talking the late 80s now, and obviously video today is available on your phones and all kinds of things like that. Back then, you were very lucky if you had a video recorder at home, let alone a video camera. And most of those cameras were shoulder mounted VHS things, so big heavy units. So not a lot of people had those, but the school that I went to, Brock Hill, it did have a video camera where they filmed performances, things like school plays, school dance, and very quickly I got my hands on this camera on the pretext that I was going to record the school productions, and I very much did, and I very much enjoyed it. I learned some skills from that. I mean, to begin with, I think I was out of focus, my camera was moving all over the place, and a mentor of mine, Jackie Mortimer, who's a director of Instep Dance Company and a former vice principal of the school, gave me my very first direction notes. Was the camera was too shaky, it was out of focus, and the colours all wrong. So you better get that right for tonight, because we can't have that video going out like that. And really, she only had to tell me that once. After that, I always made sure that video was rock solid. And in fact, I worked for her for a good 25 to 30 years, filming her dance performances. So it's all about that kind of first direction and that first inspiration. Now, there was also a teacher at that time called Peter Catmull. He was the head of drama. He saw my potential with video production. He didn't see my potential in drama. I was rather useless at that, but he saw my potential behind the camera, and he'd have gone and applied for the school to take part in a national video competition sponsored by Panasonic. As a result of that, Panasonic sent some kit to the school for us to submit a video. So I had the end of one summer with unfettered access to all this video equipment. I think it was incredible. I made a local documentary on the town I lived in. I did a mini enterprise at school where I ran a television station. I made a documentary on that. It all looks a bit grainy now. I did a promo video for the school. I did all kinds of stuff, and it really ignited my passion for video. Obviously, once the school time had finished and the camera had to go back, I was back to square one. But gradually, through my first job, I was able to start buying some video equipment. And you have to remember, back then, things were slightly different. You were editing on tape.
Perhaps the most enjoyable part of making a video is editing the pictures afterwards to create the mood and the pace that you want. Of course, it also allows you to wipe out those inevitable mistakes and to produce the best possible video from the available material. Now, this is the basic equipment that you'll need. You'll want one video machine to replay your material, another video on which to record, and a television or monitor so that you can see what's going on. You can have any combination of tape formats and machine. For instance, a Video 8 camcorder can be used as the playback machine into a VHS recorder.
I had a camera connected to VCR, and I had to push play on the camera, push pause on the VCR, make my edits that way. Now you can cut and paste on a phone or on your PC, and you can turn a video around it very quickly. I think some of the art back then was synchronization and being able to move the vision mixer at the same time and make sure the sound was right. You had one chance to do it. And so I had a couple of interviews back then for TV. I was unsuccessful, which was a crying shame, really. I kind of almost gave up on ever working on video again, but subsequently I got a job at a police training centre. So back in 1995, I started to work for a place called Ashford Police Training Centre. It was where all the police officers from across the UK in the southeast predominantly were trained. There was about 4 other national training centres very much like this, and I was sent there as a video technician. So my first job was to start videoing police scenarios, car chases, bank robberies, exams, all that kind of thing. So I had a whale of a time and access to all kinds of video equipment. But I very quickly moved into the IT world. So the IT manager left and I suddenly became an IT manager. The video kind of rolled off and I didn't think I'd go back to it. But this goes to show you how things can change, because obviously back then it was all videotape and analog. But then came what was called non-linear editing.
Non-linear is giving us the flexibility and the enjoyment that we had in the film cutting room.
I think for documentary makers who are looking at making 20, 30, 40, 50-minute films, the idea of having to cut them in a linear system is just a complete non-starter.
I think non-linear editing is the future of post-production. I think at the moment we are in the absolute infancy of non-linear editing.
In the beginning was film. News crews would shoot a hot item, only to wait several hours for the film to be developed in a laboratory, and then wait for the film to be printed.
Film editing has been around for nearly a century, and although film is non-linear in how you can edit, then there are a lot of problems with how you deal with the material, keeping track of all the little pieces of film, all the little pieces of sound, and also the fact that you're working with one physical cutting copy. So if you make changes to something, then the only way to get back to how you had it before is to actually physically unmake all the changes that you made.
Ultimately, it's frustrating. It's not very quick. You can't see the results of your work in a way that you can on a computerized system. You can't see what a dissolve is going to look like. You can't see what a basic optical is going to be. In fact, sometimes on a Steamboat screen you can't see a whole hell of a lot of anything.
Videotape promised to be an effective alternative to film. For television, it meant immediate access to source material, and editing was possible without any physical cutting.
Tape has always had the advantage that you could have as many different versions of a program as you wanted, because you were just copying from the masters to another tape. But you cannot change something, you cannot alter the running length of something.
26 seconds plus the 12 seconds actuality so far.
Videotape editing has one major drawback. It's a linear format. To make any alteration means starting again and rebuilding all the sequences. Editing on film is non-linear. It offers more possibilities without any loss of quality.
The flexibility that you had with film of being able to try things out and see if it worked and try something else, or put a few frames here back and a few frames there on something else, you really didn't have with tape. Even when you had the computer tape offline coming in, you know, you'd have to go back and rebuild things or go down another generation.
This flexibility had a high price. Shooting on film was expensive. Editing on film was considered too slow.
You haven't got 6 months to actually produce a documentary like you had in the film cutting room. You've got 6 days.
The industry needed a non-linear editing system that had the flexibility of film and the access speed of tape. Computers had already released millions of people from the tiring inflexibility of the typewriter. The advances in digital technology meant that the storage of sound and moving images in computers became possible, and a new era in film and television began.
Because basically, you had the footage in a computer, you could manipulate it by moving it around. I mean, trust me, based upon what you have these days, it was very clunky in the old days. It was very basic cuts, very basic transitions you could do. Titles were very simple. But again, it just opened up the possibilities for me for video. Now, we're talking in a period where there was still no YouTube. So though you could make video, you couldn't really get it out there like you can today. There was no social media like Facebook. There was no YouTube. There was no real means of uploading video, because back then it was dial-up modems. But gradually I built my skills up. I started doing things like recording dance shows and putting it onto DVD. I played with chroma key so I could have a virtual background, teleprompters, that kind of thing. So I kind of learned my craft at the police training centre, outputting onto DVDs. And then, of course, came along the internet and the ability to start uploading content. So I had a long career in video. I did eventually give all that up. I was doing weddings, I was doing school performances, but I got a new job working for a TV station. So I finally, at the age of 40, got into the TV business, but only on the streaming side, not on the production side. And I very much gave up video completely. Then came last year. So I basically had a point in my life where I thought, well, I've had a big family. I'm still quite busy with that, but I've got a big job. But somewhere in the middle, there's nothing for me to do. And I still think I can do something creative. So I guess it's a bit like being an artist. I wanted to paint and I thought, well, I have all these video skills. And of course, you can film with your phone. You don't need a lot of equipment. So as an example, today, I'm actually recording this video on my iPhone 15 and it's a perfectly capable camera. I don't need an awful lot. I edit on Final Cut on my Mac. I do have a teleprompter, which I can use. I've got some lights, I've got some green screens, but I don't have tripods and loads of cameras and loads of lenses. I don't need it. Obviously for the podcast, I have a slightly different setup. We'll come and cover that maybe another day. But with this equipment, I thought, what can I do? I really struggled to come up with the idea for a podcast. Now, it was a chance trip to Stratford. I went to Stratford to swim in the Olympic pool. I took my 360 kind of GoPro style camera with me with the pretext that I was going to be able to record myself swimming in the pool. That wasn't allowed. So I ended up walking around the Olympic Park with the camera and a friend, and I played the footage back when I got back and I thought, well, that's amazing because we're walking around, you can spin it all around in 360 and you can see us talking. I thought, that's a fantastic idea. Why don't I tie that up with an interview? So I could interview someone someone interesting, and we could walk along and take in the surroundings. So that was the real start to 360 Timmy. Now, my first guest, Sam Bynes, is a friend from my local gym. He was totally up for doing a test episode. Well, thank you for joining us again for another 360 Timmy. And this week we're in Victoria Park in Ashford, Kent. So we literally did a test episode. The pretext is that I'll always do research on the person. Now, luckily I knew a fair bit about Sam because we've been talking for months, so it was locked in up here. But essentially, whilst we're interviewing, I have to kind of recall these things. Now, with other guests, subsequently, who I don't know or I have limited contact with, I do an awful lot of research and I can't carry notes as I walk around. So I have to kind of ingest it and recall it. So I kind of do it like bullet points. Now, for today's broadcast, I've got a list of points in front of me on my teleprompter. So I'm not reading a script, but I am reading some kind of checkpoints, like areas to cover. That's kind of how it works when I'm walking around. I've got this mental note in my head. I've got some key points about their background, but really it's for them to tell their story. So I have enough to just trigger some information that they can come back with. So essentially, that's how 360 Timmy came about. I started it in August last year, and it really has been amazing because it gives me something to do. It doesn't take an awful lot of time to create the interviews for 360 Timmy. It's more about going to the location, filming it on the day. There's very little editing because the premise is I don't cut the video. Anything that happens stays on there, and I try and keep it as interesting as possible. So you're, as an audience member, walking around with us and you're witnessing the interview, you're hearing a conversation like you would if you were walking along with us or sitting on the park bench with us or that kind of thing. You're kind of listening in on a conversation, and that's the way I wanted to keep it. So preparation for it and filming takes some time, but the actual edit is a very quick turnaround. I have to make an audio version. I have to add some titles. I have to generate the 360 files. That takes a fair bit of time and upload to YouTube, but relatively straightforward. And then really the things that take time is the metadata and the information I have to put into YouTube that actually makes it work. So a lot of time spent on that, things like thumbnails, some trailers to put out in the week on Instagram or Facebook, and then I schedule the episodes, and I can really record a load and have them ready to go over a number of weeks, which is great. So that's why I like doing the 360 Timmy format, and that will be coming back. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, I did have some problems at the end of the year where it got cold. It gets rather difficult to walk around without it raining, or people coughing and sniffing because of the cold, including myself. So I'm waiting for the weather to get a little bit better. That's probably going to be towards the end of March, and I'll be back on it again. So the next challenge was, how do I then keep the video going? So I did chop up the original interviews, put them to some little shorts. I scheduled those to go out so the YouTube channel keeps going. But I thought you need some fresh new content. I thought, how about I do actually try a piece to camera? And I thought it'd be quite interesting to cover content that I find on YouTube that I find interesting, because I'm on it all the time, and I could bring it together in a particular show. So hence these minisodes that I've been trialing out, and every episode I try something different. I possibly didn't use so much third-party content in the first couple of episodes. I started adding some in to see how it went. I obviously have to be careful about copyright and what music and what footage I use. I do get permission from most of the people that I feature. Again, in some cases, I hope to interview them in the future as well. So the whole process of bringing these episodes together is really good as well. Effectively, what I do is I record a piece like this, the actual introduction and the narration, and then I cut the video accordingly, and that's been great for me. I've got a great rig now. I've got a teleprompter, I've got some good lights, I've got almost a set behind me, which I ironically have actually more used for work over the years, but comes in quite handy for this. I'm sure as time develops, I want to really do what a lot of YouTubers do and get this studio looking really cool. So it's currently just a regular office at the moment, but I'm going to try and zhuzh that up in the future. So I may well stick to the minisodes as well as the 360 interviews. I don't know. It depends how it goes. But what I want to say is it really helps me. It's kind of a hobby. I think if you've got a passion for something, you should get yourself out there. Go and talk about it. I was talking with a friend earlier that it's not normally the thing I would do, but if I have a passion for something, maybe someone else does as well. So, you know, let's get some content out there. I have got friends that just watch YouTube and they don't have a television license. They don't watch any other TV other than what they see on YouTube. So it is picking up. It's more accessible. I mentioned in the first episodes, there are now apps on your TV. So you don't even have to have it on your phone or your PC. You can just sit back and watch it in your armchair. And I like the fact that every episode is a very different topic. I'm not what you call one-trick pony. I'm not just doing film reviews or tech reviews. I've got content about everything and anything. And I may well cover content in the future of topics I don't know about and see how that goes. But every week's an experiment. So this week is maybe experiment number 2 in the unscripted world, where I'm just talking to camera. I've got no rigid script. I try not to say a lot, and maybe cut those kind of things out. You see, I've just cut that. Look, I've screwed up again. Look. I didn't even make a mistake, did I? Anyway, that is effectively how I fill my time. And I would say I'd encourage you to make content. I mean, I've said to a few people, when you go on holiday, why don't you do a little blog? You're going to some fascinating places. Get the pictures together, do a bit of a voiceover. People will want to see it, right? If you've got something interesting to talk about or a different point of view, it's kind of citizen TV now. I mean, it's fantastic, as I said. You think about what I talked about earlier. In the early days when I wanted to get into TV, the only way I could get my content onto TV was to actually work in the industry. Now you can literally generate stuff on a whim. Now, here's an example. I got a call from my great friend Dom King at the weekend. Saturday night, he said, "Do you fancy doing a quick live stream? We'll just talk about anything." And within 10 minutes, we're on Twitch, and we managed a whole hour of talking. It's crazy, isn't it, to think that when we were at school, none of this stuff existed. The fact we could just hop on our computers and start a show just like that.
Just like that, Tim.
Just like that. Just like that.
Yeah,
I think that bring me back. I think that calls for a laser. A laser. Is it going to work? Yay!
There you go. Now, who would have thought that would be possible? That's crazy.
Exactly. I know, it's crazy.
By the way, if you're just tuning in and joining us. Tuning in. Typical radio guy. Tuning in. If you're tuning in.
And it was just great. The fact that we could just broadcast like that to well, it was 3 in the end, but it could potentially be millions, but it was a little bit of an experiment. It's just fantastic. So I really love this. I wouldn't say that I wanted to be a presenter. As I mentioned earlier, I was more about behind the camera, but the more I do pieces to camera, the more I kind of train my skills, reading a teleprompter, making sure I'm smiling and being happy, making sure I'm always looking at the camera, all that kind of stuff. It just brings it together. So it's really, for me, a great hobby where I can keep learning and keep developing, and hopefully you enjoy it as I get better. So I would welcome, as ever, your feedback. You can reach out to me at 360timmy.com for all the links to all my socials and email contact details. Please like and subscribe if you like this video, and you have a super day.